Resources will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recess at the committee at any time. Under Committee Rule 4F, any oral opening statements at hearings are limited to the chairman and the ranking minority member. I ask unanimous consent that the following members are allowed to participate in today's hearing from the dais: the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Evans, and the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer. Without objection, so ordered. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Thank you all for being here today to discuss this important topic. Today's hearing will examine the U.S. Geological Survey's Earth Mapping Resources Initiative, commonly known as Earth MRI. As we all know, critical minerals are essential to our daily lives, with applications ranging from technological innovation to national defense. This Congress, House Republicans have made it a priority to enact policies that will help us unlock our domestic mineral wealth and secure our mineral supply chains. Thankfully, the United States is blessed with an abundance of natural resources, from oil and gas on the outer continental shelf to critical minerals in Minnesota's vast Duluth complex. So what keeps us from responsibly developing these resources and achieving national energy dominance? In part, it's our failure to take a full accounting and inventory of our domestic natural resource wealth. As the rest of the world has raced ahead to identify and collect data on their resources, the United States has lagged behind. We must modernize mapping of our nation's surface and subsurface if we wish to secure America's supply chains and reduce our dangerous over-reliance on foreign adversaries. The Earth MRI program helps us solve our dependency problem by providing valuable data that helps shape our understanding of the critical mineral potential across our great nation, as well as informing decisions about land use, resource management, hazard assessment, and our infrastructure. Through Earth MRI, USGS partners with state geological surveys, federal agencies, private industry, tribes, and universities to achieve this goal and collect this invaluable data. What's unique about Earth MRI is that data from other USGS programs are integrated to form a more complete picture of the United States natural landscape. Earth MRI was conceived in the first Trump administration as a result of an executive order which instituted a policy of identifying new sources of critical minerals. Then, in 2021, Congress authorized and funded Earth MRI, and this authorization is set to expire at the end of the current fiscal year, making this hearing a timely opportunity to discuss the importance of mapping and the many benefits from Earth MRI brings to our nation. This year's reauthorization of the Earth MRI will also provide us with an opportunity to strengthen the program and expand upon the progress we've made over the past 5 years. Prior to Earth MRI, only 7% of the U.S. was covered by high-quality geophysical data. As of 2024, that percentage has tripled. Since Earth MRI's inception, USGS has partnered with 46 states and territories for data collection, investing $199 million on data acquisition across this nation. These collaborations are invaluable, leveraging national capabilities alongside local and private sector expertise. The public and industry benefit exponentially from having Earth MRI data publicly accessible. Tribes and local communities are implementing Earth MRI data into their decision-making process for infrastructure and resource management. Industry uses this to de-risk exploration, which shortens project timelines and reduces cost. State geological surveys are being revitalized through Earth MRI finding, which helps to rebuild a skilled geoscience workforce in collaboration with our universities. For example, in my home state of Minnesota, Earth MRI has collaborated with the Minnesota Geological Survey, the University of Minnesota, and the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources to reveal new insights on historic resources across Minnesota's Iron Range. If we want to mine in America, as Secretary Burgum says, we must first map, baby, map. We must meet the moment, and now is the time to examine how Congress can position the United States to unleash technological innovation, enable domestic mining, and secure resilient American mineral supply chains. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses on this topic, and will now yield to the ranking member for her opening statement, Representative Ansari.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Stauber. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today about a program that is at the forefront of scientific and industrial progress, the United States Geological Survey's Earth Mapping Resource Initiative, or Earth MRI. Earth MRI is a critical investment in American science, competitiveness, and our communities, and I am pleased to say it enjoys strong bipartisan support. Earth MRI was established in 2019 in response to a 2017 executive order on critical mineral supply chains. Recognizing the value of the program, Congress expanded it significantly through the bipartisan infrastructure law, providing $320 million over 5 years to accelerate mapping and data collection efforts across the country. Since its inception, Earth MRI has established itself as an incredibly important and productive federal science program. It is producing strategic, comprehensive, and publicly accessible data that supports decision-making across multiple sectors of the economy. Earth MRI uses modern and emerging technologies, including airborne geological surveys, high-resolution topographic mapping, and geochemical sampling to build a more complete picture of what lies beneath our feet. Most of the United States remains poorly mapped at the level needed for modern resource management. Earth MRI is helping to fill those gaps. Importantly, the information generated by Earth MRI is publicly available. That means it can be used not only by federal agencies, but also by state and local governments, researchers, communities, landowners, and private industry. The benefits of this program extend well beyond identifying critical mineral resources, though of course that is an important one. Earth MRI data supports groundwater management and the assessment of the risks of landslides and earthquakes for community safety. It supports both conventional and enhanced geothermal exploration, infrastructure planning, and environmental restoration. For the mining sector, Earth MRI helps identify areas with mineral potential before companies invest significant resources in exploration. This lowers private sector risk while also reducing unnecessary disturbance to communities and the environment. The program is also helping to identify opportunities to recover valuable mineral byproducts from existing mines and historic mine waste, reducing the need for new land disturbance while strengthening domestic production. For geothermal, better geologic information lowers exploration risk and can help unlock domestic energy resources that might otherwise remain underdeveloped. And keeping all of this information in the public domain incentivizes innovation. Earth MRI has already partnered with 40 states and territories, tripling national coverage of high-resolution geophysical surveys, and by 2024, it had achieved 23% geophysical data coverage of the United States. Now, as bipartisan infrastructure funding expires at the end of this year, Congress faces important decisions about the future of the program. The question will be whether we will continue to build on the successful investment or allow progress to stall, just as the benefits are becoming increasingly apparent. I hope today's hearing demonstrates the far-reaching benefits of this program and the strong return on investment that it provides for the taxpayers. And while I'm glad to see support for this program on both sides of the aisle, I must add that Earth MRI does not exist in a vacuum. It relies on a scientific ecosystem made up of the state geological surveys, universities, and research institutions, entities that are currently under serious threat from this administration's cuts to federal staff, grants, cooperative agreements, and federal-state partnerships. These are the partners that collect, analyze, and apply Earth MRI data. When those institutions are weakened, Earth MRI is weakened too. We should not be selectively investing in one program's specific priorities while dismantling the infrastructure it depends on. Democrats support a strong Earth MRI program because we support science, public data, and evidence-based decision-making across the board. We support the scientists, the universities, and state partners who make it happen. I look forward to further discussing how continued federal support can strengthen a well-funded, balanced scientific initiative and the broader scientific ecosystem. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Ansari. We will now begin our first panel which is comprised of one witness. Let me remind the witness that under committee rules, they must limit their oral statement to 5 minutes, but their entire statement will appear in the hearing record. To begin your testimony, please press the on button on the microphone. We use timing lights. When you begin, the light will turn green. At the end of 5 minutes, the light will turn red. And I will ask you to please complete your statement. I will allow the witness to testify before member questioning. Our witness for this panel is Dr. Colin Williams. He is the program coordinator for the Mineral Resource Program at the U.S. Geological Survey. He is stationed in Moffett Field, California. Dr. Williams, welcome. You are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Stauber, Ranking Member Ansari, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify on the U.S. Geological Survey's Earth Mapping Resources Initiative, or Earth MRI. The public lands and minerals stewarded by the Department of the Interior include more than 480 million acres of surface land, 750 million acres of subsurface and mineral estate, and more than 3.2 billion acres offshore. Non-energy minerals produced from public lands generate billions of dollars for the economy and support tens of thousands of jobs. Recognizing that mineral development is a national security priority, the department is committed to ensuring that the United States is a leading producer and processor of critical minerals to create jobs and prosperity at home, strengthen domestic supply chains, and reduce the influence of adversarial states. The Organic Act of 1879 charged the USGS with examining the nation's geological structure and mineral resources. Our data show that over the last 60 years, demand for critical and other essential minerals has increased dramatically, while U.S. production has declined precipitously. Reversing that trend and renewing domestic mineral production depends on collecting and delivering modern geoscience data. The USGS launched Earth MRI in 2019 in response to President Trump's Executive Order 13817, a federal strategy to ensure secure and reliable supplies of critical minerals, which called for modernizing geological, geophysical, and topographic mapping in areas with potential for critical minerals. The USGS conceived Earth MRI as a partnership with state geological surveys, other federal agencies, universities, tribes, and the private sector. This partnering led to the first national map of areas with critical mineral potential, which helps USGS prioritize data collection and provides stakeholders with an understanding of the potential distribution of critical minerals. At the start of Earth MRI, less than 7% of the nation was covered by magnetic and radiometric geophysical surveys at a resolution suited to characterizing mineral resource potential. Today, Earth MRI has nearly quadrupled this coverage and is on track to collect data for over half of the areas in the U.S. with critical mineral potential by the end of this year. Earth MRI surveys have covered the Minnesota Iron Range, Alabama Graphite Belt, Idaho Cobalt Belt, Colorado Mineral Belt, and a region of Nebraska which may be the largest niobium deposit in the United States. Earth MRI has also studied lithium in Nevada and Oregon, and California's Mountain Pass rare earth element mine. However, much of the country still lacks the geoscience data necessary to locate and quantify critical mineral resources. Earth MRI has already accelerated the nation's mineral economy. Since 2019, Earth MRI has contributed to a surge of about 100,000 new mineral claims on federal lands. Earth MRI impacts include detection of potential for niobium and rare earth elements in Maine, data on graphite and rare earth elements in Wyoming's Laramie Mountains, and mapping in the Yucatan uplands in Alaska that has prompted accelerated exploration in the area. Data from Earth MRI has increased interest in remining legacy mine waste, a potentially important source of critical minerals. Earth MRI has launched the National Mine Waste Inventory, worked with states in characterizing minerals in mine waste, and collaborated with NASA on the world's largest airborne hyperspectral survey to examine critical minerals in mine waste as well as undiscovered mineral deposits. Earth MRI also has broader applications. Earth MRI geophysical data is revealing buried fault systems across Arkansas and many other states, as well as geothermal energy potential in California and Nevada. Earth MRI has also supported the Arizona Geological Survey's establishment of a new core repository that has sparked industry partnerships and is helping to train the next generation of economic geologists. Moving forward, the USGS will maintain Earth MRI's collaborative approach, coordinating with state geological surveys and other partners as we modernize the nation's geologic, geochemical, and geophysical mapping. We are investing in innovative geophysical techniques and tools, and as the list of critical minerals has expanded, we are evaluating additional areas of the country for ore deposit research and discovery. The USGS will advance data delivery and develop new products to make Earth MRI data immediately useful to stakeholders. We will also apply artificial intelligence tools developed in collaboration with the Departments of War and Energy to accelerate mineral resource assessments and help users interpret Earth MRI results. As Earth MRI continues to modernize our mapping of the nation's minerals, it is providing insights essential to securing our mineral supply chains, strengthening our economic and national security, and making science-based decisions for responsible resource management. The USGS appreciates the subcommittee's interest in Earth MRI and looks forward to future collaboration on this important issue.
You ended right on time. Perfect, thank you. You practiced it. Thank you, Dr. Williams. Thank you for your testimony. The chair will now recognize members for 5 minutes of questions. I'm going to now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Dr. Williams, we know the Duluth complex in northern Minnesota is one of the most significant deposits of critical minerals, copper, nickel, cobalt, and the other platinum group metals. With estimates suggesting the resource value could reach into the trillions of dollars, what additional mapping and higher resolution geophysical data are needed to better define and characterize these deposits and accelerate responsible development?
Thank you for the question. We have been active in that part of the world, actually the USGS for some time, but with Earth MRI, we're collecting modern data that help resolve many of the structures that are favorable for mineral deposits in the vicinity. Some of those are actually quite small, and you need the high-resolution data to be able to tell you more accurately where that potential may be.
Right. I think that we have the opportunity, and I'll just speak for the Duluth complex. I mean, we have the helium deposit that was accidentally found by a test drill, and there's also a really intense titanium find in there. So the development of this technology and furthering the map is only going to accelerate and find more of these. So next question, what if anything, Dr. Williams, is holding back the USGS from utilizing these new technologies? Does Congress need to provide further direction to the agency in the Earth MRI reauthorization to help make this possible?
Well, of course, we're always welcome more stability and longevity in the authorization of our programs, but we're very happy with how Earth MRI has gone so far. We really value the partnerships and the support that has come from Congress and the administrations. And as far as we're concerned, as long as we continue to have a path forward, we will continue to deliver impactful results.
Perfect. Technologies such as full tensor gravity, FTG, can provide significantly greater subsurface detail than many traditional mapping approaches and have been widely used in mineral exploration around the world. What is the USGS doing to evaluate whether advanced technologies like FTG should play a larger role in the program as it evolves from broad regional mapping towards identifying specific critical mineral-bearing formations?
Yes, so of course within Earth MRI we conduct this foundational, modern, high-resolution data, a variety of data types, but we're always on the lookout for new and innovative technologies that are developed in the industry and academia, and I think that's one of the areas in which our partnerships with the academic community really, and of course industry, come into fore, because they're often the ones who are coming to us with new and innovative ideas, technologies that they would like to try out. And since we have that basic framework data we get from the main measurements of Earth MRI, that gives us an opportunity to see how these new technologies can help advance our subsurface understanding.
Dr. Williams, as we move forward with our mapping and the new technology, from your experience, can you just give us an estimate of the economic potential, the economic value that could bring to this nation? I'm talking about unheard of deposits at the moment, et cetera, or the Duluth complex.
Yeah, well, our colleagues at the Association of American State Geologists recently did a survey to study the economic benefits of geologic mapping, which of course is just one of the, it's a very important part, but it's one of the parts that we conduct through Earth MRI. And they found that the economic benefits are at least 5 to 7 times and perhaps as much as 35 times the investment in the mapping itself. And we believe from the experience in other countries that have invested in what they refer to as pre-competitive data like Earth MRI, countries like Australia and Canada, they see similar payback from the geophysical surveys and other data collection efforts.
Up to 35 times.
Yes.
The benefit. Wow, impressive. Thank you very much. I will now turn it over for questioning to Ranking Member Ansari for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. Dr. Williams, thank you for your many, many years of service to the federal government and particularly in the United States Geological Survey. I'm glad to see good scientists in these essential roles like yours in the federal government. As you know, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act set a 2031 deadline for a nationwide comprehensive surface and subsurface mapping initiative and data integration for critical minerals. Dr. Williams, is that deadline achievable at the current pace of work?
It's a deadline we're committed to, and at the current pace of work we're working under with the supplemental funding from the IIJA, we expect to meet that deadline.
Okay, great. Can you also share what the most significant remaining gaps are in our national geologic data?
Well, as I mentioned, we're making tremendous progress. We will have about 50% of the areas for which there is identified potential for critical minerals done by the end of this year, but of course that leaves the other 50%, a little less than 50%. And as we learn more and work with our state partners, academic partners, and industry partners, we're also learning more about resource potential and identifying new areas we should look at. So those are the big immediate gaps, is filling in the parts of the map and looking at those areas of significant potential we haven't looked at yet. But we're proceeding as we have resources to do it.
Thank you. Congress provided the Earth MRI program with a significant funding increase through the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act, $320 million over 5 years. That supplemental funding is set to expire at the end of this fiscal year. Right now, Earth MRI gets about $74 million per year in combined IIJA funding and annual appropriations. Dr. Williams, can you briefly describe what USGS was able to achieve with that increase in funds? How was the Earth MRI program able to accelerate?
With the additional funding, we not only increased the rate of data collection for the types of data we were already collecting, increased the funding we could provide to the state geological surveys and support their work. We could also diversify some of the data types we were collecting. I mentioned aeromagnetic and radiometric data. We've also started collecting airborne electromagnetic data, which gives us a different look at the subsurface. And that was also our opportunity to really launch our mine waste inventory and start looking systematically in collaboration with the states the potential for recovering critical minerals that have been left behind in legacy mine waste.
Next year, when the IIJA funds run out, Earth MRI looks on track to get around $16 million in annual appropriations, which is, of course, a $58 million drop. What will that drop in funding mean for Earth MRI's work? How much faster could USGS do this critical mapping if the current funding levels were expected?
Earth MRI, fortunately, is a very scalable program. We were very fortunate that we had the 2 years of start before the supplemental funding came in, and we were able to scale up very effectively and efficiently. And basically, we deferred to Congress and the administration on what the appropriate funding level is, and we will do our best effort, whatever funding level we end up with, and continue to move forward.
Thank you again for your service. I yield back.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes Representative Whitman from the great state of Virginia for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Williams, thanks so much. Thanks for all that you do with the Mineral Resource Program there at the Department of Interior. Incredibly important work. You know, as we address what we see as supply chain issues here in the United States, making sure we reshore those domestic supply chains, understanding too the sustainability of what has to go along with that, and making sure too we're doing that all based on good scientific data. Being the scientist myself, working for years there, I understand how critically important that is, both for decision making, but also in responsibly developing those resources. And we know modern technology allows us to do some incredible things. That's why Earth MRI, I think, is so important to the future of the United States, both economically and strategically. We know that the better mapping we have, the better decisions we make. I was just in Alaska last August with my colleagues, and we saw there what was happening with new mapping. We saw too decisions that were looked at in the past and not made, but with new data, they looked at it and said, well, there's a different way we can do things. There are more resources in places where we didn't realize there were resources. So all kinds of new avenues open up when you have that up-to-date data, and especially too when you're using scientific technology like Earth MRI. So that to me is the great potential there. If you'll let us know, and you spoke a little bit about this, why is the reauthorization for Earth MRI so critically important within your program, but also for the nation?
I think it sends the message that whatever the funding level, whether we go back to that appropriated request of approximately $11 billion a year or something greater than that, that the USGS is committed to advancing our understanding of domestic mineral resources in a transformational way in the long run. And I think that as much as we all recognize that the situation with our critical mineral supply chains is an immediate threat, it also is true that it takes time and effort to fundamentally change that situation and a long-term commitment. And we would appreciate that endorsement of a long-term commitment.
I think it's important to note, the data that we need to make those decisions, but also what comes in the development of science to make us even more accurate in determining where these mineral resources are, which makes us more efficient in how we develop them. Give me a scenario, too, of what would happen if the program lapsed. Where would we find ourselves, not just marking time, but where would we regress if this program wasn't reauthorized?
One of the things I think I would be most concerned about, obviously there would be an impact on the USGS, but one of the best aspects of Earth MRI has been our relationship and our work with the state geological surveys. And through the funding from Earth MRI, many of these state surveys have regrown and invested in their mineral resource sections. They've brought on students who are now from a few years ago, now they're working in industry or the geological surveys, the USGS, on mineral resources. And I think there would be an immediate impact of retrenchment in those states and state geological surveys who've been such tremendous partners for us.
Are there any gaps or frustrations that you may have with the current program, things that Congress can address to help you, to enable you to do the things that need to be done?
Well, at the USGS, we're known for grumbling and complaining about bureaucracy. But to be honest, I think this we're very pleased with the support we've seen to date across the executive branch and Congress. And I've been at the USGS a long time, and I think Earth MRI has been one of the outstanding examples of how well a program can work, and we're very happy with it.
Well, that's great. And listen, the places we visited and working with the state officials as you do, in both places like Minnesota that we visited, but also in Alaska, they've been highly complimentary of what you're doing to work with states. And many times, too, you're enhancing their ability to have those databases necessary for their state agencies to make thoughtful and timely decisions. So we appreciate what you do, and I know the states appreciate it. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Chair. Now recognizes Representative Elfroth for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Williams, thank you for being here. I want to follow up briefly on the line of questioning from the ranking member and from Representative Whitman. And I think we all share universal anxiety about the fact that China is just eating our lunch when it comes to critical minerals, and that this program, Earth MRI, really has the potential to rebalance that as a national security concern. I think it also proves that a little bit of good science goes a whole long way. And I'm curious, Mr. Whitman asked you about what happens if the program lapsed. The ranking member asked you how much further this could go or your need, and I know you have political constraints in telling us that. But I'm curious, though, what is the return on the investment here, dollar for dollar, of if we increase this program, what is the output going to mean for the American people?
Thank you for the question. As I mentioned with our surveys indicate with geologic mapping alone, there's at least 7 times return on investment, possibly much higher. And I think across the whole portfolio, we are seeing something similar. We're seeing a lot of activity by industry. Of course, that takes time to play out and see where the resources are developed and all. But we definitely have seen growth in the U.S. Geophysical surveying industry that wasn't there before, partly from our contracting with geophysical surveys, but also from increased work with industry. We're seeing other economic effects across states that are making plans around vertical integration of material that might come from future mines that could play into factories and manufacturing. So and we're going through right now, we're in the process of developing a request for information to develop a broader survey of Earth MRI impacts. Now, we've been at this for a few years. We believe we could go out and actually get more detailed information on how we're changing things. But looking around the world, it's very clear that this kind of work does have significant payback.
And just briefly, because we're also working on this from a DoD perspective as well, talking about national security concerns, I am curious your professional assessment of our workforce and our mining schools, and are we producing enough scientists to achieve the goal we're seeking here?
There's a broad consensus within the minerals enterprise that we have a shrinking and aging workforce. That's not a surprise, and in particular, many of the traditional mining schools have been working very hard in recent years to keep their programs afloat and to graduate enough new students to work in the industry. And we've actually in the last year launched a pilot program for external grants to universities to help support education and workforce development in the geosciences. And you're seeing that interest in investment across the federal government and with many of the professional societies, because it is a tremendous concern.
Yeah, I think it's something we need to work on more, though. I appreciate that assessment. I want to switch gears to geothermal, and I think another bipartisan priority for this committee, and I want to thank everybody involved, has been the fact that we all agree there's an energy affordability crisis. We sometimes disagree on how to solve it, but we agree on geothermal. Being an East Coast state, the opportunities are more limited just because of depth challenges than out west. But I do understand that the flagship program GeoDawn has some real promise, and especially in Nevada, it sounds like it was able to discover a site that was just 150 meters in depth, which I think is an opportunity. I think Congresswoman Lee is going to talk about this in a minute as well. But I look at that as real potential for East Coast opportunities. Can you give me any insight into how we can utilize the GeoDawn program to find geothermal opportunities on the East Coast?
Oh, absolutely. So, when we're looking at mineral resources, we're essentially looking at ancient earthquake faults, ancient volcanoes, ancient geothermal systems that were active in the past. And their geological, geophysical signatures in some ways are very similar to active faults and active volcanoes. And we learn a lot by cross communicating. And in fact, we were just at meeting of the Association of American State Geologists last week, looking at geothermal systems in Virginia, and they were associated with fault zones that can be imaged through brand new Earth MRI geophysical data.
I would appreciate that in my remaining seconds. Could I possibly ask you for a one-on-one meeting to talk about that East Coast opportunity moving forward?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes Representative Crank for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it, and thank you, Dr. Williams, for all you do. The United States is blessed with very abundant energy and mineral resources, but we can't get at them unless we know and have them fully identified and mapped. And that better geological mapping gives us the certainty to make better land use decisions and energy and mineral development decisions. Sanborn Mapping Company, which is in my district, is one of the prime contractors that USGS uses to fulfill its mapping requirements under several of the programs like 3Depth, 3DHP, and Earth MRI. They have the capacity to not only go out and get the data needed to better understand where our resources are, but to process the data. And one of the key tenets of USGS's mapping programs is that this data is publicly available. Can you share how much of the U.S. has been mapped under Earth MRI and what percentage of that data has been made publicly available?
Yes, so as I mentioned when we started, our foundational data collection of magnetic and radiometric data, we were started with coverage of the United States of 7%. We've increased that by more than a factor of 4, so we're getting up toward 30%. When we contract for a survey, the mobilization, the actual acquisition of the data takes a certain amount of time. It depends on weather, other schedules. And then when we get the data, our geophysicists have to work on the quality control and analysis before we can publish it. So there is a bit of a lag of a few months to sometimes many months from when the survey is completed to when the data are public. But all that data is in the pipeline. We just released, I believe it's 4 separate data sets just in the last few weeks. And we're working very hard at trying to accelerate that pace.
So from your answer, I've heard from stakeholders in the geospatial and mining industry that USGS faces resource constraints in processing the data in a timely manner. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, there always are limitations, but we're doing our best
Sure.
to meet those challenges.
Yeah, as this committee considers reauthorization of the Earth MRI program, I think it's important to find creative solutions to accelerate not only the data collection, but its processing timeline. And from your perspective, if Congress clarified that USGS has the authority to enter into agreements with companies like Sanborn to process Earth MRI data, would that lead to data being made available or used faster?
In some ways, yes. One of the things we've been looking at, for example, if you're what we call a potential field geophysicist, you get the raw data from the survey, you're in heaven, it's wonderful, you work with it. Many other, even geologists, don't necessarily know how to work with that kind of data. So there are derivative products you could get produced that help people who aren't experts work with that data. And we've been working with contractors to build in more of those derivative products as part of the contract so that we don't need to slow down that process of generating them ourselves.
Okay. And then finally, I submitted this question to the record for the secretary because while I believe it's important that this data is made public, I do have concerns about adversaries' access to potentially sensitive data. So I want to ask you, as Interior expands efforts to map the United States resources with programs like Earth MRI, is it important that we both strengthen domestic technical capacity and safeguard sensitive geospatial information? How is USGS approaching contractor selection and data management to ensure Earth MRI supports US-based capabilities and protects the integrity of these strategic assets and data sets?
Thank you for the question. First and foremost, we are always careful to follow all the rules and laws and regulations about contracting and data collection. And one of the most important aspects is data integrity and making sure that until that data is ready to be released, it is not accidentally released or accidentally accessed. We're also focusing more than we did in the past on making sure there are no vulnerabilities to, say, having that data tampered with or have to worry about the chain of custody. But once we've got to a certain point, as has been mentioned here, we think it's very important to put it out in the public domain so it has the greatest value.
Great. Thank you, Doctor. Thanks for all you do. I appreciate it, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes Representative Grijalvo for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In southern Arizona, my constituents understand that we need to accelerate a transition to clean energy. They also understand the impact that mining has left behind, oftentimes to the community's detriment. From abandoned mines and contaminated lands to ongoing conflicts over sacred tribal sites and water resources, many communities in Arizona are still living with the consequences of past and present mining decisions. Given the longstanding environmental and public health impacts of mining, we have a responsibility to uphold our values by protecting the health, safety, and well-being of our communities. Prioritizing robust research and sound science helps ensure that our decisions are informed and responsible. Throughout the process, we must respect tribal sovereignty and protect sensitive cultural and natural resources and ensure local communities have meaningful voice in decisions that affect their future. While we need certain materials for clean energy's transition, it's just as important to understand where development may not be appropriate. Good geological information helps us identify opportunities, but it can also help identify groundwater resources, geologic hazards, and other areas where extra caution is needed. As stated today, Earth MRI data is not just for mining. It's for land managers, groundwater research, and preparing for earthquakes and landslides, anything that has to do with the geology of the United States. Dr. Williams, can you explain how Earth MRI data can help agencies and land managers identify areas that might warrant conservation or groundwater protection, or areas that might be at risk of an earthquake?
Oh, absolutely. So, of course, one of the things you learn when you collect this kind of data and interpret it is you learn which areas are most prospective for critical minerals and also those which are not necessarily very prospective for critical minerals. And that allows land managers and other members of the stakeholding community to focus on the areas that are going to be a focus of industry and consider what the implications of that are, what other types of information might be needed. We were talking earlier about the Duluth complex. One of the things we're doing with Earth MRI in that part of the world is working with tribes to collect, we've been collecting this airborne EM data. It's not only very useful for mineral resources, it's also very useful for groundwater studies. And so the tribes in that area have information that will help them understand if there are any issues related to potential groundwater impacts. They and the community at large can address those.
Yeah, and groundwater is life, especially in Arizona. Can you tell us how Earth MRI helps increase transparency and what the benefits are of this data being publicly accessible?
Well, as I mentioned, that I think it levels the playing field. It gives industry opportunity to decide where they would like to focus their efforts. And one of the things we're seeing with Earth MRI is going to meetings, we're running into exploration companies from Canada and Australia coming over here saying we never had this opportunity before. Now with your data, we can focus and do some real work. But also that by having it out there, we're not privileging any part of this interested community at all. We're simply supporting informed decision-making.
Yeah. Overall, thank you so much. Overall, I will support this program, and I do want to make sure that the distinction is clear. Mapping is an important form of research, but it should not predetermine where mining should take place. It is an important tool, but it's not the only one. Community input, meaningful tribal consultation, and environmental review are essential and critical, and will tell you as much, if not more, about whether a mine can succeed in a responsible way. Thank you so much. I yield back.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes Representative Gosar for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Williams, for joining us today. Since President Trump's inauguration, the U.S. Geological Survey has worked tirelessly to unleash American energy and restore mineral dominance. The importance of our nation's critical mineral supply chains, from exploration and mapping to manufacturing, continues to grow, and that cannot be overstated. My home state of Arizona is blessed with abundant critical mineral resources that can help advance this domestic production agenda. In fact, Arizona is rich in antimony, copper, lead, lithium, manganese, magnesium, silver, uranium, zinc, and many other critical minerals. In fact, I think it's 14 of the top rarest 20 minerals are located there. The USGS Earth Mapping Resource Initiative, or Earth MRI, is an outstanding federal-state partnership that helps to identify the valuable resources beneath our feet. As Secretary Burgum said, we must map, baby, map. This is how America strengthens its supply chains, reduces its dependence on foreign adversaries, and remains competitive with China. Now, Dr. Williams, what has Earth MRI suggested about Arizona's reserve of rare earth elements and other critical minerals? Are they rich in specific regions?
There are a number of areas in Arizona which have been identified as having potential for rare earth elements, everything from uranium deposits with rare earth elements up on the Colorado Plateau toward ancient crust down in southern Arizona. And what's been lacking is the information to enable us to go from, okay, we've got something interesting, is there really a resource? And that's the role that Earth MRI is playing to fill in that gap, to say, okay, we have some favorable geology. What does the data really say about the resource potential? And is this something industry could build on to potentially develop?
And so this really helps us identify where these critical minerals are, right?
Yeah.
And you know, the test holes become much more important, but very few after that, right? Okay. Now, what are federal agencies using Earth MRI data to evaluate and expedite project planning?
We work very closely, of course, with the Bureau of Land Management. We support them as needed for decision-making. They need resource management plans, land management decisions, permitting, especially on the question of critical minerals and mine waste. We work informally and formally with not only federal land management agencies across the board, but also the EPA, DOE, and others who are very interested in whether there's potential to recover critical minerals and address remediation efforts at the same time. And we're also extending some of our work to support the Department of War and questions about whether there are critical mineral resources on some of the military lands that really haven't been looked at in many decades.
Well, you know, you can explore, map, and map all we want to, but you also have to mine, because you have to have that critical mineral there. And so, you know, it's the other side has been very hesitant. They've always said, not here, somewhere else. And this identification of these location of these minerals makes it very accommodating to those extracting it. Okay, but you have to go in and extract to make it work, right?
Yes, but of course, you know, we take it from the scientific perspective. We provide the information that's relevant to the potential to develop critical minerals, but it's really up to the permitting agencies and the regulations to determine whether any individual project goes forward or not.
Gotcha. Now, are you familiar with some of the new technology in regards to, it used to be called smeltering, you know, the way they're pulverizing the materials, and they're getting everything out of it. So like with our copper in Arizona, we get some cobalt, manganese, all sorts of different things. Are you familiar with some of this?
Yes.
Have you seen the new filtration aspects with that, with basalt?
Basalt is a challenge. It's hard to work with basalt. It's pretty recalcitrant rock, but we definitely, one of the areas in which the USGS and many of our academic partners look at is the opportunity to expand that resource space, to develop new extraction techniques so that we can reduce the vulnerability to certain supply chains and establish a domestic resource where maybe one didn't exist before because we couldn't get those particular elements or minerals out of certain types of rock.
We're finding out it's a super filter right now as you do it right. So thank you very much for your expertise, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes Representative Lee for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here, Dr. Williams. It's been clearly established how important Earth MRI is for many reasons, including identifying critical minerals, especially in my home state of Nevada. But I want to talk about abandoned hard rock mines. And in Nevada, our Division of Minerals has warned for years that abandoned hard rock mines are posing significant safety and environmental risks to our citizens. And while there's been a federal focus on cleaning up legacy coal mines, abandoned hard rock mines have historically received much less attention and far fewer federal resources. This is true even as Nevada officials emphasize that just in my home district, at least 1,800 hazards stemming from abandoned mines exist, and quite possibly many more. Dr. Williams, the bipartisan infrastructure law required the Interior Department to comprehensively inventory abandoned hard rock mines in the United States. This is a key initial step in the long road to remediation. It was delegated to the USGS. Can you give me an update on the USGS's progress in putting together a national inventory, as well as describing Earth MRI's role in that process?
Absolutely. So we've finished a multi-year program of identifying mine-related features on the landscape across the United States. Within that, there's hundreds of thousands of those, as you might imagine. Within that, we've identified a subset that are likely mine waste features, and in working with the states through Earth MRI and within our own program, we have been going out and developing an inventory of where more precise information where those waste sites are, in particular the volumes of the larger ones, knowledge from past mining as to what might be in those waste bodies, and also sampling to advance our understanding of what actually is, and then building on that to be able to assess what the resource potential may be across the country.
Great. That's a good progress. And last Congress, we passed my bipartisan Good Samaritan Remediation of Abandoned Hard Rock Mines Act. This created a pilot program at the EPA that would empower Good Samaritans, local governments, Trout Unlimited, nonprofits like that, to help clean up these mines without taking on the liability. Their help is obviously very welcome in light of the chronic underfunding of federal programs. Dr. Williams, while USGS is taking the lead in documenting and detailing the abandoned hard rock mines, the EPA is the agency that actually holds the keys to the Good SAM permitting process. Can you detail, are there any compatibility gaps or resource bottlenecks that might prevent USGS data from being utilized by the EPA and its Good SAM partners in implementing the program? And walk us through the approach for coordination on that front.
Oh, absolutely. So, of course, I can't speak for the EPA, but they're moving forward very actively on this topic. And we work with them and many other of the agencies that are responsible for legacy mine waste through something called the Federal Mining Dialogue, and are developing agreements with the EPA to help them evaluate technologies that are being proposed to recover critical minerals from mine waste at hazardous waste sites. So our focus is to provide them with as much of the science support as they need. And that's a growing and building collaborative effort, but we are optimistic about how that's going to go.
Great. This is obviously a good first step in getting some of these abandoned mines cleaned up, and we're looking forward to continuing to work to make progress on that. And with that, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes Representative Hurd for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Williams, good morning. If I have a question about prioritization, if Congress were to double Earth MRI's budget, what would you do differently? And if Congress were to cut it in half, what capabilities would you make sure that you held on to?
So I can't answer that in great detail, but I can say that in general, we've found that Earth MRI is very scalable. If we approximately doubled the budget, we would collect approximately twice as much data. But one of the things we found with the supplemental funding through the IIJA and our ability to diversify the program for things like mine waste, for things like airborne electromagnetic surveys and others, is those are tremendously valuable. And as much as possible, even if the budget were to shrink, we would try to hang on to some, perhaps all of that more diverse portfolio, because we see the value of all those different things.
Thank you. Now, of course, mapping doesn't produce a single ounce of critical minerals. What, from your perspective, and I understand there's a private sector angle to this permitting angle, but from your perspective, can you help us understand what are the 2 or 3 biggest bottlenecks that prevent good geologic data from becoming actual mines?
Well, I can't, as the USGS, I can't speak to the specifics of permitting. I'll defer to my colleagues at the Bureau of Land Management and other agencies for that. I think when, as I mentioned earlier, we work quite a bit with colleagues both in geological surveys and industry who've worked internationally in countries like Australia and Canada. And I think the subtopic has come up of de-risking. They feel like in the United States, before Earth MRI, there wasn't sufficient foundational data to enable them to efficiently and effectively explore for mineral resources. Their budgets are constrained too, and they want to be able to focus their work where there's the greatest payoff. As we have more data from Earth MRI, they're finding that framework that supports that kind of detailed exploration. What happens after the exploration work is underway? Of course, we could talk about the science and the resource potential, but we use our information to support the permitting process, but we don't run it.
So good data can help de-risk some of that exploration.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, Earth MRI was created in large part to strengthen America's critical mineral supply chains. The same geologic data has applications well beyond mining, groundwater and natural resource hazard analysis, to also infrastructure planning and geothermal issues. My colleague from Maryland referenced that issue. We just passed a big, important geothermal permitting reform bill out of the House earlier this month. As we look at this program, at the Earth MRI program, what are some of the most promising uses of Earth MRI that people don't necessarily appreciate?
Well, I think you've touched on this, is that the value of Earth MRI data is that it's valuable in many, many applications. Just today, a colleague of mine sent me an email about how he thought that he could do a simultaneous geothermal mineral resource assessment. The data that indicate favorability for geologic hydrogen, which is a relatively new concept, we're discovering benefits from these data all the time, and we're actually, because as we mentioned, it's kind of a regional, national scale activity. We've been pleasantly surprised at times that we've actually resolved mineral occurrences at the deposit scale, and helped the exploration industry more in that regard too.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Can you, just big picture, zoom out, AI, communication, munition systems, not to mention everyday technology, all rely on critical minerals. Can you talk about how our country's access to domestic critical minerals, critical mineral resources determine our capacity to field and sustain modern intelligence and electronic warfare capabilities?
Well, I think it's well known that modern technology applications, whether in the defense or civilian sectors, depend tremendously on critical minerals. We essentially use practically the entire periodic table of the elements these days, and as a result, you can. You were holding the cell phone there. There's a tiny amount of indium in the screen of that cell phone. As a quantity or as a dollar value, it's small, but the cell phone doesn't work properly without that critical mineral component. And so what we found is across the board, we need to understand the role of each of these elements or minerals in these technology applications and understand what's necessary to secure those supply chains.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Williams. Mr. Chairman, my time has expired.
Thank you very much. Chair now recognizes Representative Rivas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for recognizing me. As mentioned, Earth MRI has been extremely successful because of state, private sector, tribal, and university partnerships, especially in my home state of California. Earth MRI has been a tremendous asset to help California identify natural resources such as mineral deposits, groundwater, and dangerous fault lines. I ask for unanimous consent to enter an article published on June 11, 2026 from NASA's JPL entitled NASA USGS Scientists Go Rock Hounding in California's High Desert into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. This partnership between USGS and JPL shows us what the successful combination of boots on the ground, geologists, and state-of-the-art airborne visible infrared imaging spectrometer technology can accomplish. Dr. Williams, thank you for being here today. I'm an engineer by training, and before serving in Congress, I was in the California State Assembly. I'm always encouraged to see programs like Earth MRI driving good science with bipartisan support. Programs like this one are driven by partnerships. In this case, partnerships with states and state geology programs, universities, and other federal agencies, tribes, and as well as industry. An example of a successful partnership is the one between USGS and JPL. Dr. Williams, can you expand specifically on how Earth MRI works with universities?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we find is, many of our state geological survey partners are co-located or actually part of universities, and we partner with them that way. Some of our federal partners, you mentioned JPL and others through NASA, JPL, of course, tied to Caltech, have the strong academic partnership. And then we have individual engagements. For example, you will be hearing from Professor Holley from Colorado School of Mines. We have a new building that's going in at the Colorado School of Mines expressly for fostering better collaboration on energy and mineral resource topics. And we're aiming to develop collaboration and grants to foster programs in the mineral resources across the board, and provide as many universities programs as possible with better opportunities to engage on these topics.
Yeah, and is there something that you think Congress should do to expand these types of partnerships?
Again, of course, I can't, say anything about budgets, but I would say that there's a tremendous determination across the board with many departments and agencies and within the university system with our state partners to advance workforce issues. I think anything that Congress can speak on that helps coordinate and focus those efforts and bring us together in a complementary way is always welcome.
Yeah, while I'm encouraged, to see the support for Earth MRI today, I have to say that I am alarmed by some of the other developments affecting our science programs across the federal government. That includes the complete dismantling of the Ecosystems Mission Area at the USGS, which works on climate adaptation, fish and wildlife research, sea level rise, and countless other topics that are essential to the well-being of our country's lands, waters, and communities. There have been severe funding cuts at NSF, Department of Energy, Research, NIH, and unfortunately many more agencies and departments. As my colleagues have said, Earth MRI does not exist in a vacuum, and to fully leverage this program, the country needs to ensure that the entire federal science program is thriving, and I hope that's something that we can work on across the aisle to restore. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. The chair recognizes Representative Hayman from Wyoming for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wyoming is a national leader in energy and mineral production, from coal and uranium to trona and gold. My state is a key partner in Earth MRI. Wyoming understands the importance of this initiative, and because of that, the state has invested significantly in this project with an additional $4 million likely in upcoming data collection. These data collections are the foundations that allow geoscientists to analyze what is below our feet. This information is then turned into geological maps that are used to drive models that lead to exploration and then to mineral development. Geoscientific data like these are useful beyond exploration, with implications especially for groundwater and geologic hazards like faults, landslides, and radon. Quote, "It's a game changer for us," end quote, Rainey Linz, the state geologist of Wyoming, has said about the MRI geospatial mapping effort. And this technology deployment has been extremely beneficial to Wyoming and the American West. This program has also provided funding for the boots-on-the-ground data collection, including detailed maps of King and Ragged Top Mountain, critical minerals investigations in the Laramie Mountains, as well as reevaluation of existing sediment samples collected as part of the National Uranium Resource Evaluation Program more than 50 years ago. Dr. Williams, thank you for being here today. What specific types of pre-competitive geoscientific data are most urgently needed to de-risk mineral exploration in the United States?
As we mentioned before, I think the airborne geophysical surveys are key. The geochemistry, you mentioned the NURI samples and rerunning those, the geologic mapping, but in particular the geophysical surveys. It's saying something obvious, but Wyoming, for example, is a very big state, and there's a lot of geology there that hasn't been as well characterized as it should be. And the airborne surveys, and we really appreciate the investment from the state in supporting our work, is giving us a view that we never had before and really stepping things forward.
There are a lot of different geological formations in Wyoming. It's interesting to drive across the state, such as through the Wind River Canyon, just as one example. Has publicly available Earth MRI data made the U.S. more competitive internationally for global mineral exploration?
Absolutely, I can say that with confidence.
Okay. Although we are seeing improvement in geologic data coverage for mineral exploration, the U.S. is still significantly behind Australia and Canada. What would it take to get on an equal footing with those two countries?
I would say, continued consistent progress through Earth MRI. We work very closely with Geoscience Australia and the Geological Survey of Canada, our equivalents in those countries. And while you're true that they're much farther down these paths, we're catching up. And I think it won't be too long if we can continue to make progress that we're seen in the same perspective as favorable to having data that facilitates exploration and discovery.
Do you have a timeline of when you think we'll catch up or come close to it?
I haven't thought about that specifically, but we could come up with an estimate.
Okay. Earth MRI includes a focus on characterizing mine waste. Is this work being coordinated with the Department of the Interior's efforts under Secretarial Order 3436 to treat legacy mine waste as a potential source of strategic minerals, including uranium?
Yes, 3436 is a very important mandate to guide our work in legacy mine waste, and we've been working very closely with the department and our sister bureaus in the department to advance a plan to accelerate our work on mine waste and its potential.
We were in Alaska last August and visited a mine where they were talking about processing their tailings. And if this is possible, it is truly and literally a game changer for these operations, not only in terms of the value that is potentially sitting in those piles, but also from an environmental standpoint. Is that something that you're working with these countries to advance?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Are there opportunities to streamline characterization and permitting pathways for remediation plus recovery projects on already disturbed federal lands?
I can't speak to the permitting process in detail. Of course, we're not a permitting agency, but we do know that as this is a relatively, the mining industry has remined tailings at times and over history, but this sort of broad look at potential for extracting critical minerals from mine waste in different types of lands, different circumstances, is relatively new, and the permitting agencies are working through the process of understanding how to do that efficiently.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes Representative Begich from the great state of Alaska.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Williams, Alaska has over 365 million acres of land. More than 60% of that is controlled by the federal government. All kinds of different land statuses, land uses. Does Earth MRI currently prioritize how it gathers information on what kinds of lands? Does it exclude certain kinds of lands from inventory?
Well, we of course start with from the geological perspective of where the resources are likely to be. We rely heavily on dialogue with the state geological surveys. They're truly a partner with us in prioritizing areas to look at. But in particular, if, for example, I'll mention tribal lands, we are very careful and committed to respecting tribal rights and sovereignty. And tribes, of course, determine whether or not we collect data on their lands, what data we collect. We're always interested in supporting tribes in their interest if they want us to collect data on their land, but where we collect the data does depend on that interest. But beyond that, of course, our priorities on, say, national park lands are not as high as they are elsewhere. But sometimes there's geology to understand in the parks that informs geology outside of the parks. So,
yeah, and I can think of several examples in Alaska with respect to parklands, because we do have so much of our land in that status, where there are significant geologic opportunities and critical mineral opportunities, I think that are important to characterize. As you're going through and applying these geophysical techniques, how does the USGS try to get greater resolution on high priority or high potential targets? Do they sort of drill down, as it were, on these targets and use additional sort of on the ground techniques to validate and get better resolution?
To the extent that we have the resources to do that, absolutely. Alaska, in particular, is an excellent example because it's large and remote. Much of it is remote, and the kind of data we could collect to cover the state doesn't always have the resolution we might like. So based on the results we get from the initial surveys, we often will come back and conduct a more focused survey. For example, in characterizing some sites with mine waste potential, we've gone back and funded some high-resolution topographic data collection to supplement the existing data.
And does Earth MRI employ any resistivity or conductivity on the ground modeling, or is it data collection that's almost always aerial or satellite?
It's mostly airborne. Our program as a whole does support magnetotelluric measurements that are done on the ground. We also support some gravity measurements that are done on the ground. And where possible, we've been looking at collaborations with other partners, especially in some mine waste settings where the ground electromagnetic measurements can be very useful.
What resources are typically identifiable by Earth MRI, and which critical minerals might not be identified by your techniques right now?
Oh, I have to say that's a long answer.
We've got 1 minute.
If only because every type of mineral deposit, every type has different geological and geophysical and chemical signatures, and often you're not actually detecting the deposit, but you're detecting effects the formation of that deposit has on the surrounding rock. So you're finding the breadcrumbs that are leading you to the deposit. So it varies tremendously, and what we're trying to do with Earth MRI is find all those trails of breadcrumbs as much.
So
as we can.
needless to say, though, The techniques that we have today will likely not be the same techniques that we utilize in the future, that the technology continues to evolve, and we will probably need to go back, not just to the data, but back to the field to collect additional data as those techniques improve.
Yes, certainly as technology evolves, and but I think one thing I will say for Earth MRI is that this is a solid foundation that the country can do all sorts of studies and benefit from for decades to come.
And just quickly, how is AI being utilized by the USGS as a part of the data collection and processing exercise?
We've been exploring the use of AI to help us do our mineral resource assessments, to ingest these large data sets. Obviously, we have the new data from Earth MRI. We have legacy data that goes back from before the USGS was even founded, and have been advancing techniques to accelerate the use of all that data and also explore it and find where there are anomalies that, for example, the human analysis might not have detected.
Thank you. With that, my time has expired, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. If there are no further questions, we will now move on to our second panel. I want to thank Dr. Williams for your valuable testimony. You are now dismissed.
Thank you.
While the clerk resets our witness table, I will remind the witnesses that under committee rules, they must limit their oral statements to 5 minutes, but their entire statement will appear in the hearing record. I'd also like to remind our witnesses of the timing lights, which will turn red at the end of your 5 minutes, and to please remember to turn on your microphone. As with the first panel, I will allow all witnesses to testify before member questioning. Looks like we're all set there. Our first witness of our second panel is Dr. Nicholas Hayman, the president-elect of the Association of American State Geologists. He is stationed in Norman, Oklahoma. Dr. Hayman, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Stauber, Ranking Member Ansari, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today regarding the reauthorization of the U.S. Geological Survey's Earth Mapping Resource Initiative, Earth MRI. My name is Dr. Nick Hayman. I am president-elect of the Association of American State Geologists, and I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you on behalf of the nation's state geological surveys. I'm here today with a simple message: Earth MRI is working, and it deserves reauthorization. Earth MRI addresses a fundamental challenge. The United States cannot responsibly develop resources it does not understand. Before minerals can be mined, before energy resources can be developed, before private capital can be invested, and before permitting decisions can be streamlined, there must first be reliable information about our geological resources. Earth MRI provides that foundation. The program was created in response to a growing national need. The United States has become increasingly dependent on foreign sources of many minerals that are essential to modern manufacturing, advanced technologies, energy systems, and national defense. Yet significant portions of our country have not been studied with modern geological, geophysical, and geochemical methods. These terms refer to the tools that scientists use to conduct the work of resource assessment and safe extraction. What makes Earth MRI particularly effective is that it operates in the pre-competitive space. This term means that the program does not subsidize individual companies or direct investment towards specific projects. Instead, it creates publicly available geological information that reduces uncertainty for everyone: state governments, federal agencies, tribal nations, universities, land managers, private industry. All benefit from the same data sets. This work supports critical mineral exploration, but also geothermal energy development, hydrogen fuel prospecting, groundwater management, infrastructure planning, and environmental remediation. Since its establishment in 2019, Earth MRI has provided $78.6 million to state geological surveys. At least one category of Earth MRI data has been collected in 46 states and Puerto Rico. I cannot think of another U.S. program that has employed so many methods in such an organized manner. We have seen the positive impacts for state geological surveys firsthand. In Michigan, Earth MRI partnerships help support the creation of a dedicated minerals program. In Wyoming, federal investments complemented significant state investment. In Oklahoma, we have built a strong collaboration with a Native American nation, honoring tribal, economic, environmental, and social interests. That project is one of many that is seeking to reuse the mine waste from the nation's early 20th century sites that powered us through 2 world wars and can now help us face 21st century challenges. In all of these efforts, state surveys have attentively increased the nation's geological workforce through student training, early career opportunities, and building expertise that harmonizes universities, public agencies, and private industry. Earth MRI also aligns directly with many of the priorities being discussed here in Washington, D.C. today. It strengthens supply chain resilience. It advances energy security. It helps reduce uncertainty for private investment and supports informed land management and permitting decisions. All of these priorities are found in currently active executive orders and Department of Interior memoranda. Earth MRI accomplishes these goals through information rather than regulation. But here is the urgent matter before us. The work is far from complete. Significant portions of the country remain incompletely mapped for geology and resources. Additional data are needed. Reauthorization will provide the continuity necessary to maintain momentum, preserve partnerships, and continue building the geological knowledge base that supports the nation's long-term economic competitiveness and resource security. Mr. Chairman, Earth MRI is exactly the kind of federal investment that deserves continued support. It is efficient, collaborative, science-based, and nationally beneficial. It leverages state expertise, supports private sector activity, and produces information that serves the public for decades. On behalf of the Association of American State Geologists, I strongly support the reauthorization of Earth MRI and thank the committee for its leadership on this important issue. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Hayman. Our next witness is Mr. Jeff Lovin. He is the Senior Vice President for Woolpert, Inc., and a board member of the Management Association for Private Programmatic Surveyors. And he is stationed in Port Charlotte, Florida. Mr. Lovin, you are now recognized for your 5 minutes.
Chairman, Ranking Member, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm here representing the broader geospatial and mapping industry, including firms that directly support U.S. Geological Survey's Earth Mapping Resource Initiative, known as Earth MRI. I have 3 decades of experience in surveying and mapping for a national company called Woolpert, and I currently serve on the board of MAPS, an organization representing more than 100 geospatial firms here in the U.S. USGS has long encouraged a competitive private sector marketplace for mapping services to supplement their own activities, and there are a host of companies that have made the investment in the airborne vehicles and sensors to support the USGS mapping mission at the greatest value for the taxpayer. These same partners can bring significant technology assets and experience to bear on this issue. I am here to underscore the critical national importance of this program and to express strong industry support for sustained and, where possible, increased investment. Earth MRI is foundational because it gives the United States the high-quality geologic, geophysical, geochemical, topographic, and related data needed to better understand our surface and subsurface resources. That matters because we cannot secure domestic critical mineral supply chains, strengthen manufacturing, support infrastructure, planning, or advance defense readiness if we do not first know with confidence what resources we have, where they are, and how they can be responsibly developed. If America wants domestic critical mineral security, it first needs domestic mineral intelligence. It also is important that policymakers in Congress utilize all the tools available across proven partners of the USGS to most effectively advance that intelligence. Earth MRI provides that foundation. This program is not just about mining, it supports the broader national system that depends on critical minerals, electronics, advanced manufacturing, energy technologies, communications infrastructure, transportation systems, and defense platforms. This is an issue that has transcended political differences, and Congress recognized that importance when it authorized Earth MRI through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and directed USGS to accelerate efforts to build a modern understanding of the nation's geology and critical mineral potential. That law provided $320 million to accelerate that work and set the deadline for an initial comprehensive national modern surface and subsurface map and data integration by November 15, 2031. Earth MRI is also a defense-relevant capability. Critical minerals are not simply an economic issue, they're a strategic issue. They shape supply chain resilience, industrial competitiveness, and national security. This initiative originated through collaboration between USGS and leadership in Congress, including early engagement with the late Senator Thad Cochran, which gave a clear understanding that the United States needed stronger domestic resource intelligence to compete globally and reduce strategic vulnerabilities. That reality is even more urgent today. At a time when geopolitical competitors, especially China, have built strategic leverage across critical mineral supply chains, the United States cannot afford to underinvest in the scientific and geospatial foundation needed to understand its own resource base. Our competitors are not waiting for us to get smarter about our own geology. Earth MRI helps us ensure the United States is not making 21st century industrial and defense decisions with 20th century geologic visibility. The strategic case is clear. Earth MRI was created to help close this long-standing gap. According to USGS, before the initiative launched, only a small percentage of the country had high-quality geophysical coverage. Since 2019, Earth MRI has expanded modern mapping through airborne geophysics, geologic and geochemical surveys, LIDAR, hyperspectral data, and mine waste research, and other advanced data sets in partnership with state geological surveys, federal and state agencies, academic institutions, and private industry. At the operational level, Earth MRI depends on advanced airborne geophysical surveying, including aeromagnetic data collection, LiDAR-based 3D mapping, and hyperspectral imaging. These technologies are essential for identifying mineral systems and geologic features that cannot be detected from surface observation alone. A small group of highly specialized firms perform this work today. Many are members of MAPS, the National Association of Geospatial Firms. These firms represent the backbone of the U.S. airborne geophysical capability and are responsible for executing the surveys that make Earth MRI possible. However, a significant portion of the underlying sensor technology remains sourced internationally. This creates a strategic gap at the time when the United States is actively working to secure domestic supply chains, not only for minerals, but also for the technologies used to find them. And in regards to time, I'll skip towards the end of my statement. I will run out of time. I'll just say that at a time when geophysical competitors are actively securing access to critical minerals, the United States must invest in understanding its own resource base with equal urgency. If we want domestic mineral security, we must first invest in domestic mineral intelligence. Earth MRI provides that foundation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next witness is Dr. Elizabeth Holley. She is a professor of mining engineering at the Colorado School of Mines, and she is stationed in Golden, Colorado. Dr. Holley, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Stauber, Ranking Member Ansari, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Holley. I'm a professor in the Mining Engineering Department at Colorado School of Mines, where I lead an interdisciplinary team focused on the responsible production of critical minerals. As this subcommittee has established, the U.S. faces a mineral supply crisis, which we are trying to solve with incomplete knowledge of our own subsurface. Earth MRI is more than a mapping program. It is an essential piece of public data infrastructure to lower geologic risk. Much of my work is in mineral exploration. Only about 1% of early-stage discoveries become a mine. A discovery costs the private sector about $500 million in exploration alone. Earth MRI should be central to the federal government's strategy to de-risk mineral exploration. Other countries have data sharing frameworks that leverage broad-scale data sets like Earth MRI and then require finer-scale private sector data such as drilling information to be open access, lowering exploration costs, encouraging investment, and enabling sustainable land management. My research in greenfields and brownfields exploration shows that, for example, for the battery minerals, most of our geologic availability will not be mined for technical, regulatory, environmental, and economic reasons. We need to cast a broader net through a better understanding of our subsurface so that we have more options. I also develop high-level strategy for mineral supply. The U.S. can import, develop new mines, recover waste from value from waste through byproduct recovery, mine waste reprocessing or recycling, or reduce demand. Our work examines the optimal ratio of each supply pathway for each mineral across 60 U.S. critical minerals. We need data to be able to do that. Data collected by Earth MRI and affiliated programs illustrate the importance of federal funding as well as gaps that must be filled. First, there is no comprehensive federal data set on the geochemistry of U.S. mines. The The U.S. shares the Critical Minerals Mapping Initiative database with Canada and Australia, but U.S. data are limited. For the majority of U.S. mines, we do not even have geochemical data from a single rock. This is an egregious data sparsity problem that should be solved by expanding Earth MRI to include a national ore sampling campaign to improve understanding of what is being mined, and a national mill sampling campaign to determine what is being recovered and what is going into waste. In the absence of this information, my team developed a statistical method to estimate what is being mined in the U.S. today. If we unlocked byproduct recovery of just 1% of all the elements we mine, we would dramatically reduce our supply chain vulnerability. We appreciate the House Natural Resource Committee's bipartisan work to better understand the barriers to recovering critical minerals as byproducts. One of these barriers is a lack of mineralogical information on how each element is hosted in the rock itself. If the U.S. acquired these data in a national mill sampling campaign, institutions like Colorado School of Mines and our industry partners could develop flow sheets to recover those elements, using my team's decision tool to identify the infrastructure and sites where federal investment can make the U.S. supply chains less vulnerable. We're nearing publication of research that expands our byproduct study to the 322 hard rock sites where the U.S. has mined metals since 1980. Our data show that if we reprocessed even a fraction of our accumulated mine wastes, the U.S. could supply the world. With continued funding, the USGS National Mine Waste Inventory will provide the data on active and legacy mine waste, enabling us to develop new technologies that transform liabilities into assets. Earth MRI relies on strong partnerships with state geological surveys, industry, academia, and communities. Our university partnership with the USGS is entering an exciting new chapter via the USGS Energy and Minerals Research Facility being built on our campus. A highlight of this collaborative ecosystem is the Center to Advance the Science of Exploration to Reclamation in Mining, led by Colorado School of Mines and Virginia Tech, with the USGS as a core member. The center transforms Earth MRI datasets into predictive geological models, advancing exploration innovation and training the American minerals workforce. I appreciate that this committee holds diverse perspectives on what constitutes an effective critical minerals strategy. Whether your priority is opening new mines, byproduct or mine waste recovery, recycling, imports, or demand reduction, each of these is part of the solution. Developing and optimizing this strategy requires high-quality modern data to succeed. Earth MRI is the foundational public data infrastructure that reduces investment risk, ensures transparency for communities, and gives our nation strategic clarity. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Our final witness today is Dr. Graham Lederer. He is the principal scientist at Jataware, and he is stationed in Ashburn, Virginia. Dr. Lederer, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman, Ranking Member, members of the committee, thank you for letting me be here today and share my testimony. My name is Graham Lederer. I'm a professional geologist working at the intersection of AI and critical minerals. For the 10 years prior to joining Jataware, a software firm, I was a research geologist at the U.S. Geological Survey working on critical minerals and resource assessments. Over that time, I saw an increased attention being paid to critical mineral supply chain issues as well as domestic resources. And I'm happy here to talk about the value of pre-competitive geoscience information that Earth MRI provides to sound decision-making for the nation. Earth MRI is transforming our understanding of the subsurface, and it's doing so in 3 ways: data, tools, and partnerships. I urge you to consider continuing this program and perhaps even expanding its scope. First, data. The data that Earth MRI provides is a public good, non-rival, non-excludable. It crosses many modalities, including geophysics, geochemistry, geologic maps, and is helping us capture or recapture legacy data, information that would otherwise be lost or locked away in proprietary silos, state geological survey archives, or proprietary holdings. By bringing this data into the modern age, we can leverage the best of what we already know with this newly acquired geophysical data, geochemical data, and other modalities This enables us to then utilize tools. So tools that have only recently been developed since the advent of the program in 2019. If you had asked me then if I thought the 2031 deadline was achievable, I would have considered that to be pretty daunting. But now with AI and ML, we can expedite many different processing steps as well as interpretations of that raw geological data. Going back to a quote from the illustrious geoscientist Gilbert in 1903, those who labor for science do three things. They observe, they classify, and they explain. The motivation for this is not just an increase of knowledge, but it is also an increase of welfare. Observations like those coming from Earth MRI are a key input in our models. Classification is something that can be solved with AI and ML. But explanation relies on partnerships and workforce. And those are the three things that Earth MRI is delivering. The last part, partnerships. Partnerships between state surveys and the US Geological Survey are essential for carrying out the work. Partnerships between industry and those other stakeholders are also essential. And we're developing new opportunities to grow the critical minerals workforce, something the National Academies has published extensively on. Altogether, these components make Earth MRI an essential part of the federal minerals dialogue. It also continues to provide value for industry by de-risking mineral exploration projects and attracting investment into jurisdictions that may otherwise be overlooked. So in conclusion, I urge you to consider reauthorization for Earth MRI funding, and I'll leave you with the words of the first director of the USGS, Clarence King, who wrote, "We have only just begun. The great work still lies ahead of us." Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lederer, for your testimony. I'm ending 8 years in Congress. I have never seen a witness talk like you did without notes. Congratulations. Good job. The chair will now recognize members for 5 minutes of questions. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Dr. Lederer, Earth MRI has significantly expanded our understanding of domestic mineral resources. As the program is reauthorized, I believe the next phase of the program should build upon this broad geographic coverage by focusing on higher resolution, formation-specific mapping that can better identify known economically viable critical mineral deposits like the Duluth deposit or Duluth complex rather, in northeastern Minnesota. Can you share a bit more on the value of higher resolution data?
Yeah. So when it comes to mineral exploration, there's always a trade-off between coverage, searching broad, and resolution, searching, many different types of data for a smaller footprint. A lot of what the mineral industry relies on is actually the availability of that high-resolution data to de-risk and focus their search space. In an area such as the Duluth complex, we understand the broad regional geology fairly well, but there's a lot of uncertainty that could be reduced by collecting those higher resolution data sets. And in particular, new sensing modality that allows you to see deeper, that allows you to penetrate into the crust, upper few kilometers, and better understand both the lithology, but several other factors. In fact, there are 6 physical factors that are important for mining: grade, tonnage, depth, location, grain size, and mineralogy. And really, you need a series of different tools to understand each of those components and make good decisions about the physical resource.
Thank you. Dr. Lederer, as AI and other emerging technologies continue to advance, do you believe Earth MRI is collecting the right data, or does the program need to expand beyond traditional mapping approaches and focus more on this higher resolution data, as you just explained?
I think the decision to collect airborne geophysics is appropriate because you can collect a lot of data over broad areas very rapidly. As we move forward into better understanding and characterizing those focused targets for exploration, There could be more to sample both at the surface and the subsurface. There could also be more partnerships with industry who generally focus at that smaller scale. So again, in general, there's this focusing that occurs as you develop an exploration prospect.
Thank you. Mr. Lovin, as well, as we all know, rather, mineral extraction can be an incredibly expensive and capital-intensive process. In your written testimony, you discuss Earth MRI's return on investment and allude to how the program is helping the domestic industry de-risk domestic mineral development. Can you expand on how Earth MRI is enabling our domestic mining sector?
Yes, sir. This data, this resolution, and it's several different data sets. And again, I am a mapping expert, not a geologist, but it's hyperspectral imagery, it's 3D LiDAR technology, and this airborne geophysical data. Those data sets together provide that resolution and richness of data that allows us to zero in and target where some of these deposits are, whether in the past technology did not allow that, or helps us better define it, which again just provides efficiency if it's chose to go forward and mine and extract this data and so forth. It really enables those geologists and other experts to extract that critical minerals much more efficiently and affordably than what's been allowed in the past due to the technology that's involved.
Thank you very much. One of the things I will, I want to make a comment about is, in northeastern Minnesota, we've been mining iron ore for 146 years, and that ore makes 80% of domestic steel. And when we started way back when, we had piles of rock. They were called waste rock. Let's not use that term anymore. That's potential. It will always be potential because the technology that you are in front of and building is going to be, we're going to get more ore out of that rock. So that's just a side comment from me. So with that being said, I will now turn it over to Ranking Member Ansari for 5 minutes.
Dr. Holley, thank you so much for being here today. We're a big fan of your research on mineral byproduct recovery from existing U.S. mines and how recovering these resources could help reduce our reliance on imports of critical minerals. Dr. Holley, you've talked about how you've been able to use Earth MRI data and fill some gaps in federal research. You've also called for a national mill sampling campaign. Can you tell us more about that?
Thank you for the question and for your interest. This is the data gap that I was alluding to. Because we don't understand the geochemistry of the rocks that we're actually mining, of course that information is held privately. There is a limited ability for the federal government to direct our investment to the sites where byproduct or mine waste reprocessing could help us expand the suite of elements that we're recovering beyond those that we recover today as primary commodities from our mines. So what we need is to understand every mine, the rock that is going into the mill and the rock that is coming out the other side. This could be a sequential sampling program because the ore bodies are geologically varied over space, and so what we mine over time does change, as Chairman Stauber just referenced. However, even a single timestamp would dramatically increase our ability to be predictive and strategic.
Thank you. Dr. Hayman, can you explain why it is essential that the federal government, not the private sector, is the steward of this kind of comprehensive, publicly available geological data?
The federal government plays a really essential role in the nation's geologic surveys. I'm going to speak on behalf of the Association of American State Geologists, but our baseline information that we can provide the public to, we often have private companies reach out to us as state surveys and state geologists to provide advice, provide data. We'll even make agreements with them on occasion, depending on the survey's disposition. But that baseline federal support is really the engine that drives our ability to collect those data and move into areas that, depending on the state, we may not otherwise be able to move into.
State geological surveys are doing important work, but they lack the resources to conduct national scale surveys and create a nationwide public database on their own, which is why Earth MRI is necessary. Dr. Holley, another question for you. Democrats are proud to support federally funded science and publicly available data, which is a key benefit of Earth MRI. Can you tell us more from your perspective as a researcher about why having this data publicly available is so beneficial?
This is a great question, and I think the theme that we're hearing today is both the availability of the data and the interpretation. So Earth MRI does not produce a map that says the treasure is right here. We need to be able to have scientists and researchers of all different types from all different disciplines who analyze these data from a variety of perspectives. So in my team, we bring together scientists, engineers, and social scientists to be able to look at all sides of the problem and be able to take the data that I would say are broad scale from Earth MRI, complement that with private sector data that are finer scale, and then be able to de-risk and evaluate, also strategically prioritize, and consider every possible factor that could make a resource viable or perhaps unavailable. Federal funding is essential for that, I would say, not only for the collection of the data, but also to be able to bring together these diverse teams that work across disciplines to solve these problems.
And of course, Earth MRI does not operate alone. It's built on collaboration among state geological surveys. It's used by university researchers and scientific institutions that contribute to the collection, analysis, and application of this data. Dr. Holley, final question for you. That scientific ecosystem is under threat from this administration. We've seen devastating cuts to universities and researchers. How do those threats and cuts impact your work on Earth MRI as well as other research?
I want to note that critical minerals is an area where we are seeing continued and in fact increased support. However, that means that I feel as if I am holding up the ecosystem all by myself. I am bringing in every chance I have people from all of the supporting disciplines in the grants that I receive to be able to solve these problems. We need the entire ecosystem. You can't just fund mining. You have to fund all of the science that underpins it.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes Representative Hurd for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Lederer, I thought your testimony was very interesting, and exploration traditionally took place when you have experienced geologists interpreting large amounts of data. AI seems to have changed that. Can you talk a little bit about how AI has changed that equation? Is it making geologists more productive, or is it changing how discoveries are made?
Yeah, great question. Traditionally, an exploration target would be analyzed by teams of geologists, each of which might have a different specialty or discipline that they, a geochemist, a geophysicist, a mineral resources expert, and so on. That process of going from regional to target scale may take a year of analyzing lots of different disparate data types, putting them all together, using software tools to do that, and further back, just everything on paper and overlays. With AI, we can accelerate that process something like 100 to 1,000-fold. So what used to take a year could now take an afternoon. And that's really just the classification part. You still need the experts to be able to explain what those results mean, and you also need experts to make sure that the inputs are in fact correct and reasonable and appropriate to use with any kind of machine learning tool. So I wouldn't say it's a substitute for expertise, but it's an enabler in that it allows work to happen much more quickly and reproducibly, but it fundamentally depends on the input data, and Earth MRI provides that.
But there's a huge productivity boost there that comes from AI.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you, Dr. Lederer. Dr. Holley, it's great to see you again here. Thanks. Colorado School of Mines is one of the great institutions, not only in our state, but in our country, so SCO-DIGS. I understand your testimony to say that Earth MRI is not about mining as much as it is about reducing uncertainty. And one of the other interesting things I thought in your testimony was we should be looking at new mines, certainly, but also about multiple supply pathways, recycling, byproduct recovery, reprocessing mine waste. and so on. Given limited resources that we have, what do you see as the greatest opportunity in the next decade? Where should we be devoting resources? Is it new mines? Is it recovering from existing mines, reprocessing legacy mine waste? Where should we be focused most?
Thank you, Mr. Hurd, and I'm not trying to be cute here, but it's really all of the above. Our critical minerals list is 60 elements. That's more than half the periodic table. There are some things like copper where it is going to have to be new mining because we just need so much. There's not enough out there to recycle. There are other elements, we heard indium mentioned earlier today, that will never be a main product commodity that will drive the economics of a commercial mine. We have to recover it alongside other elements, alongside zinc, for example, or we have to recover it in waste as we go back into our wastes. When we reprocess waste, we need to be thinking about what elements are in that waste that can carry the economics of the operation, and while we're there, what else can we recover? So each one of these 6 supply pathways is an important part of the solution. However, one thing our work does is look across the periodic table and across these 6 options and develop optimization scenarios to know for which element, what is the right recipe, what is the right basket of those tools for that element.
Awesome. That's terrific work. Thank you for doing that. And very proud to see this coming from my home state. Dr. Hayman, my last question is for you. In your testimony, you mentioned how in Oklahoma, the USGS and the Oklahoma Geological Survey have partnered with the Quapaw Nation to evaluate historic lead zinc mining districts and assess opportunities for recovering resources from legacy mine waste. I currently serve as the chairman of the Indian and Insular Affairs Subcommittee here on the House Committee on Natural Resources, and I'm interested in learning more about how the Earth MRI program works in collaboration with tribal nations. Can you talk a little bit about how the tribe, the Quapaw Nation, was included as a partner in analyzing mine waste sites within their area?
Yeah, it's really been remarkable how the U.S. Geological Survey has really helped the state surveys work more harmoniously with the tribes. Obviously, state surveys work primarily in their state relationships with tribes, and then the U.S. Geological Survey allows that nation-to-nation relationship, and the managers in the U.S. Geological Survey have worked really hard to build great bridges between the state surveys and the tribes. And Quapaw is a great example of that, where they were invited through the U.S. Geological Survey's activities to match with us, their state survey. So it's been a really great example.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Dr. Hayman. Mr. Chairman, my time has expired.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes Representative Hall for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm from Southern Arizona, which means that my constituents are facing relentless heat waves and sky-high energy bills, both driven by our over-reliance on fossil fuels. We must transition to clean energy and quickly. My constituents also recognize that we will need certain minerals for the clean energy technology that will drive this transition. But the mining industry does not have a great history in our state. The industry has displaced and destroyed tribal communities and cultural heritage and left a path of destruction in its wake. In fact, there are still billions of dollars worth of abandoned mines that need to be cleaned up, and local communities are still dealing with polluted water and lands, and they are left to clean up all of the consequences. These mines have walked away, washed their hands of it, and now we're dealing with those consequences. But these aren't all problems of the past. Proposed mines continue to trample over Indigenous rights and community opposition. Dr. Holley, how did you factor in this history of environmental destruction when you think about site selection for future projects?
Thank you for your question. We, in the past several years, have led a field course to the Four Corners area with students from Fort Lewis College, which is a non-tribal native serving institution, and Colorado School of Mines, to help students grapple with the complexities of energy transition for the very reasons that you just raised. So we look at mine waste, we look at reprocessing mine waste, we look at a Navajo-owned coal mining operation and a tribal utility authority. We do hands-on solar installations. There is simply no easy answer. But we are training engineers and scientists to make all of these things better. All of these industries have to become better. I would say that in terms of research, our group can offer a decision tool that we are building to help the federal government and other stakeholders evaluate the prospectivity of particular mine waste sites or byproduct recovery opportunities against a whole portfolio of criteria, including those that you raise, as well as the economics and the technical considerations. It is a very thorny, complicated problem, and we have to be training the workforce who's sophisticated to deal with it.
Thank you. We can and must do better when it comes to securing the minerals we need. We have to be smart, thoughtful, and strategic about how we mine and use minerals. We have to uphold our tribal trust responsibilities and listen to the communities in which these projects operate. Some places are not appropriate for mining. That's it. And when we need to recycling to the fullest extent and being innovative with mineral use, which is something I appreciated you mentioning earlier in your statement, how does Earth MRI and good scientific data help us move forward with developing our mineral resources in an informed and responsible way? Dr. Holley.
Thank you. We need more options. When there is only one known resource, we don't have a choice. If we are able to diversify our portfolio of options, then we can make strategic decisions and let stakeholders drive that decision-making process. Earth MRI provides the fundamental data to increase our knowledge about the Earth's crust, and then it falls on the private sector to do the more detailed work and develop some of those opportunities, as well as university partnerships on research to help de-risk those. We simply have to know more about what our options are.
Yeah, and arguably the federal government has a huge role to play in that as well. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I yield back.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes Representative Gosar for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Dr. Hayman, in your experience as a state geologist, can you share with the subcommittee any example where Earth MRI mapping has led to new discoveries or exploration projects?
There are examples. I'll just speak to one in my home state that I can't remark on the progress to commercialization, but the eastern area of Oklahoma, which actually is a belt that extends up into the upper Midwest, including Illinois, and crosses many states, of a shale belt, the fine grain dark material. We've come through Earth MRI primarily to understand the amount of rare earth element concentrations in this material, and it's found in quarries and old rock quarries, not necessarily economic deposits. It's in an area of adjacent to coal belts that have been not commercial for many years, if not decades. And it's never been at the level of coal belts in, say, West Virginia or Pennsylvania. So this kind of marginal resource has really kind of struck a lot of people as potentially really significant for rare earth element potential. And that is very much an Earth MRI example. Again, I can't really, yeah, exactly.
That's
Thanks.
fine. So, Dr. Lederer, what role will the private sector play in this? I mean, Dr. Holley made mention of this. That your refinement, and I've actually seen some of those refinements come in my office. So can you give a little bit more detail with that?
Yeah, so what generally happens in mineral exploration is a company will look at a broad region and then focus in on different targets for further exploration work. And that may include drilling, that may include a higher resolution geophysical survey, it may include surface sampling for geochemistry or geologic mapping. But it's happening at a scale that's actually much smaller than what we're talking about here with Earth MRI. And that's simply a resource problem. Globally, minerals industry spends about $10 billion or so on exploration. The vast majority of that is drilling costs. So there isn't enough available funds to just fly geophysical surveys everywhere and get comprehensive coverage. So that's why these federal funds are so important to de-risk exploration for the private sector.
Gotcha. Well, Dr. Holley, my dad and my sister are graduates of Colorado School of Mines, so you run a great institution, just got to tell you that. Now, you made a remark to my colleague from Arizona in regards that there's just not enough copper to go around. We got to make more, get more of this. And then you were also talking about prioritization. So this technology will actually help us, right, to prioritize. Like, for example, right now, we found a big, vast amount of antimony between Prescott and Wickenburg. And that's needed right now because it hardens metals for ammunition, all that kind of stuff for Department of War. Can you give us a little talk about how you see that prioritization going? Like, for example, let's say you have overlapping ore bodies, which is very, very possible. How would you do that? Would you prioritize certain ones over others? And would one mining company would get an advantage over another? How would you work that?
I think there's a lot in your question. So mineral exploration is about decreasing the area of search and investment. And we heard Dr. Lederer refer to that. In order to develop a deposit, there are a whole lot of different types of data that need to be collected. I certainly can't speak to prioritizing one private sector company over another. I don't think that's the function of Earth MRI. Earth MRI levels the playing field, and it provides basic data for everybody to be using and leveraging. I think we can do more. We certainly need more of the country covered at higher and higher spatial resolution.
Could you also give prioritization over American mine companies versus international? I mean, when you look at this, you're now streamlining this process, and there's a possibility that you could actually have more Americans taking care of this, and it helps you with your liability, your mine cleanup, all that different stuff.
It's a wonderful question for this committee, and my role is the science.
Well, the other thing I wanted to say was, I hope that you all are looking at this basalt, and it's a super filter. And it's something that will actually, I think, revolutionize mine cleanup. So anyway, thanks a lot. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Idaho, Mr. Fulcher, for 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the panel, thank you for being here. A question for Dr. Lederer. In your testimony, you discussed how pre-competitive data can compress the exploration and evaluation timelines. Can you put that a little bit more in layman's terms? To what extent can a timeline realistically be compressed? Under what circumstances?
It's hard to put a specific number on any particular project just because they're so variable depending on the deposit type, the geology, what work has been completed there previously. However, from first identification of an anomaly to then developing that into an exploration target, a prospect, a fully delineated deposit, and then into a mine, we're talking anywhere from years to over a decade, right? And that's just to do the science.
And AI applications can be potentially employed in that process?
So with AI, you can compress the timelines, but only if the data are available, right? So you still need all of those different evidence layers or channels, types of data, geophysics, geochemistry, geology. You can synthesize those much more rapidly with AI, but without them, you can't make robust inferences that are going to compress the timeline. And ultimately, you still need ground truth. You need to either have a drill hole, whether it's an old drill hole that's now been scanned and logged and digitized, or a new drill hole, which is expensive.
Thank you for that. Question for Mr. Lovin. The adversarial nations, in particular China, comes up a lot in this committee because they've got a lot of control over a lot of critical minerals, and that's concerning to many of us. Working in the private industry, what are some ways you have seen or you're maybe concerned about how the lack of geological data could be an advantage to them or how they might exploit that?
Yes, sir. Being involved in advocacy and stuff for this since the inception, I just remember my own personal shock and surprise when I learned the lack of data that we had of our own resources and how many of these nations were ahead of us and how China was racing around the world to secure leases and so forth. So, again, I applaud Congress and USGS for this program. Great to hear that we're catching up, but I think it's, again, for the whole geopolitical reason, I think it's crucial that we continue this program, encourage, that it be reauthorized, because the work, as we've heard today, is not complete, and I think we need this inventory not only to extract these resources, but just to know what we have, just to know where we stand politically against our adversaries like China and so forth. So
fair to say, if it's your view that if we don't continue this or accelerate, then that's an advantage to them?
Absolutely. When you learn everything that these things, yes, our personal devices like cell phones and TVs, but when you hear all the defense uses of these critical minerals and so forth, I think it's crucial that we protect ourselves by mapping and inventorying, and in some cases extracting these for our own defense.
Thank you for that. Dr. Hayman, I've got about a minute left. So in your testimony, you discussed the benefits of having experienced state geologists work in areas where they already have familiarity. I've been concerned for some time about the worker pool in general, overall, but and the labor pool and availability of that expertise. But could you provide an example of how perhaps that local knowledge may improve the situation or give them an advantage when it comes to this process?
Of workforce development. Is that the question? Or broadly labor health?
Both the workforce development and also just the advantage they may have in doing the job of a place they're familiar with.
Right, exactly, yeah. So we see across all the state surveys the ability through programs like Earth MRI to bring in new talent that we can familiarize and pass on the important geologic knowledge, which comes from many years of geologists working in a local area, getting to know the detailed relationships between the rock types, the mineral systems, the data sets that are there. Many data sets are analog, only learned through many years of working with them and getting familiar with them, and passing that knowledge on to the next generation is a critical part of this whole program.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. I'm just running out of time, so with that, I yield back.
Common problem, Mr. Fulcher. We run out of time before we run out of questions. The chair now recognizes gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer, who has waved onto the committee, but also chairs a subcommittee on the Energy and Commerce Committee and has done a tremendous amount of work on our rare earth and critical minerals and those supply chains for the U.S. Mr. Palmer, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's pretty well known that China controls 90% of the processed and refinement of critical minerals and rare earth elements, and that includes both mined and recycled materials. It is, in my opinion, a major national security threat. And as the chairman said, this has been a top priority for us to secure our supply chain domestically for the critical facilities that we need to process and refine. Graphite's one of those critical minerals that's used in advanced electronics that's essential in terms of defense and energy sectors and our economy. In 2025, there was no natural graphite produced in the U.S. In 2025, we imported approximately 79,000 tons, and 46% of that came from China. Yet the U.S. has abundant resources to help meet that demand and reduce reliance on our adversaries and other non-aligned nations. Earth MRI is shedding light on the graphite resources in Alabama and across the U.S. In 2023, the U.S. Geological Survey partnered with the Geological Survey of Alabama on a $1 million Earth MRI project to conduct an airborne electromagnetic survey in the Alabama Graphite Belt, which is partially in my district. Mr. Lederer, can you describe how this data is being used by industry and the positive effects that projects like this can bring to communities like in my district?
Yeah, the graphite survey in Alabama is a great example of that partnerships that we've all been referring to. The airborne electromagnetic survey for the graphite belt is somewhat unique in that it's directly detecting the mineral of interest. So graphite, highly conductive, and the EM survey shows that. It lights up on a map. You can couple that with boots on the ground field work, and that's what the Alabama Geological Survey is doing, mapping new areas. And then there's this interesting legacy story there of mines that were operational during World War I through World War II, and the pits are still there. We can see them in the LiDAR imagery, which the 3DEP program had acquired as an earlier product out of Earth MRI. So all of these data sources kind of coming together, giving us a fuller picture of the resource potential in Alabama. And as a result, there has been new activity, 2 different mining companies developing resources there, and not in production yet, but there is the beginnings of what appears to be a regional hub of battery mineral production facilities.
I think, too, it's important to note that they're not just looking at the mining part, they're already building the processing capabilities, which I think is extremely important. Mr. Lovell, having gone through the U.S. Geological Survey Commodity Report, could you highlight where the United States and private industry should be focusing when it comes to reshoring the mineral and rare earth element refining and processing capability, and Mr. Lovin, particularly what investments in domestic capabilities that we could do. I know we've made investments in MP Materials and USGS Rare Earths. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, I think I want to point out another aspect that related to that is the technology we use. When this program got underway, there was, to my knowledge, no electromagnetic survey capability available in the U.S. All of this had to come from outside the U.S., this technology, which I think is also a concern, that we need to protect that and make sure that that is technology that we have onshore in here.
We've made investments like that in companies like Woolpert, and
yes,
it's a collaborative effort.
Yes, and so thanks to this program, again, representing the MAPS organization, several of my competitors, fellow firms in MAPS, have made that investment. My firm is actually considering it and looking into it now. So this program not only enables, it enables us as a business owner to have faith to make that investment in that kind of technology. But I think that's important for us to look at that aspect of this from a security standpoint as well, that we have all these capabilities here.
But it also allows you to integrate data from other sources, which I think is extremely important.
Correct.
Which we haven't always done that.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to waive on. My time has expired.
Gentlemen's time's expired. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. I want to thank the witnesses for being here today. This is a very, very important subject. We've heard talk about the national security aspect of it, but when we look at the economic opportunities that surround this issue, I just want to point out, and I know Dr. Williams was on the first panel, but this is one of my favorite charts that USGS and Commerce does every year. First column shows that last year there was $139.8 billion worth of mined material and recycled material net of imports and exports. The second column shows that processed material was worth $950 billion, and the third column shows that when it went into our economy, it made up over $4 trillion. Over 13% of the U.S. economy was tied back to that $139 billion worth of mined materials. This is a huge issue. It's a huge economic opportunity, and we're talking about something that's foundational to be able to grow this sector even more in the future, to solve our national security issues, and also to create great economic wealth for our country. So when you look at the amount of money that the federal government is spending on Earth MRI and these programs, can you talk about the multiplier effect of that when you actually, when you get data that says, here's this resource, and it's there for the taking if somebody can go after it. I know now I think we can mine down to what, 4 kilometers, and Earth MRI looks, 30 kilometers into the surface of the Earth. What kind of economic pool and economic potential is available by using this technology along with other technology. Dr. Holley, and we need more engineers and geologists. Thank you for the work that you all do, and for all the other schools that we need to be growing these schools, because we need people to get into this field so we can do more of this work.
Thank you, Mr. Westerman. Of course, I agree. I think it is important to recognize that Earth MRI gives us a view of the crust that goes much deeper, but it doesn't always tell us where the ore body is. This is where we need multi-scale data of a lot of different types. It can help us identify prospective structures and the right geological environments, and in rare cases like graphite, it does actually point towards the good stuff that we're looking for. But mostly we're using it to look for signals. And so it's good that we're looking deeper, we're looking broader, we're gathering a whole variety of types of data that will also be usable for other things.
I had a conversation with a NASA scientist just last night. They were telling me about large deposits of helium-3 on the moon, which I didn't realize this, but he told me it's worth $20 million per kilogram. So the fact that people know that's there are people seriously looking at how do we get to the moon and collect helium-3 and bring it back to the Earth. So when we identify these deposits, and we've had a hearing in here on space mining, and people kind of chuckled about that, but we know that if that goal of being able to get these valuable minerals is there, that somebody will come up with the technology to do it. I'm using all my time talking instead of asking questions, but I know there was some extensive Earth MRI work done in my home state of Arkansas with cooperation between the Arkansas Geological Survey and Woolpert, and this was one, I got a briefing on this several years ago, and I got real excited about it because I think USGS told me there's possibly all the rare earths and critical minerals that we could ever need below the surface area in Arkansas. And I want to open this up to the panel just to kind of recap where we're at on refining that technology to getting that more granular data so we know where the deposits are, and any recommendation you would have for the committee. I think we need to obviously reauthorize the program, but any other recommendations? And we'll start on this side and go down.
I think anything you can do to distribute the different scales of observation to the states, along with a real concerted effort on existing data work as well.
From the mapping technology perspective, the 3D LiDAR data that USGS collected the last 10 years for 3DEP is one of the data layers that aids in Earth MRI. I'll harken back to that. If this program continues at the funding level reauthorized, it's kind of that if you fund it, we will come. The private sector will rise to the occasion. If you look at what happened with the 3DEP program, it probably funded three generations of technology related to LiDAR. And what you're already seeing in these first few years of Earth MRI, you're seeing U.S. firms like mine and others that are investing in this electromagnetic technology. So I think if the private sector sees the need and sees this stuff, we will adapt and invest and show up with the tools needed.
I'd like to expand the scope of Earth MRI to include more geochemistry. Of course, we can't geochemically sample the entire country at a high sampling density, but we can start pointing towards areas that would be relevant. For example, the National Mill Sampling Campaign and National Ore Sampling Campaign.
That's
really
what
help.
statistics are for, do a little sample and extrapolate it.
Well, I will happily do geostatistics all day long, but I hope in 10 years we have the data to validate my statistical estimations.
We heard about data and tools, but I think people is often overlooked. We need both the training at the universities, the opportunities in the private sector and state surveys and federal government to have a healthy critical minerals workforce.
All right. My time has expired, and I now recognize the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Evans. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
There you go. Chairman, thank you so much for letting me wave on, of course, to the ranking member as well. Thank you so much for the witnesses to come and take some time today. My home state, Colorado, born and raised there. Ground zero for America's revolution in critical minerals and energy dominance. You can see the chart behind me. This is what built Colorado, from the gold rushes and the silver rushes to expanding all of the different mining and minerals that come out of Colorado. Uranium, vanadium, helium. We've got oil and gas in my district. Colorado is really built. It's part of our state seal, signifying the natural resources and the mineral wealth that we have in Colorado. And Coloradans themselves lead in helping to innovate in these essential industries and pioneering new ways to make sure that our processes are the cleanest and most efficient in the world. As you all have noted, many other folks have noted, geologic mapping programs like Earth MRI, absolutely critical to these industries and to jobs and the cost of living and national security, especially in places like Colorado. And we've seen that. This current administration, executive orders, identifying new sources of critical minerals has been an absolute priority. And a lot of that revolves around mapping and how we can find these things so we can build stronger supply chains, reduce our dependence on China, and reinforce America's position on the global stage. And the problem is, in places like Colorado, I came out of the state legislature. Unfortunately, our state legislature and governor are absolutely hostile to being able to develop a lot of these natural resources. We had a piece of legislation signed a few years ago at the state level, outright attack on oil and gas. And we know that mining is a very closely related industry because you're harvesting those critical resources. A statistic, the Wall Street Journal just called Denver's downtown area the most vacant downtown of any major city in America. 40% commercial vacancy rate in the commercial real estate. Why? Well, in 2015, energy companies made up 35% of the tenants in the Denver downtown area. They're now down to 7%. And so we have to make sure that we're working through these unfriendly policies. We're rolling out the technology to do a good job of being able to responsibly identify and extract these resources. And so, Dr. Hayman, first question to you is just around like the workforce that we need to do this. Colorado, in my district, we have Ames Community College, very focused on hands-on development. Just outside of my district, we've got the Colorado School of Mines. Can you talk about graduates who are graduating high school, community college, advanced degrees? How many of them are going into mining immediately after receiving their academic credentials compared to what the industry is going to need in the next decade?
I'd first say that I would love to work with you to work with the association's data, the state geologists, and we often communicate with the National Mining Association, with American Geosciences Institute. I can't call on specific numerical data on that topic, but we have ample resources to get you the information you need.
Do we need more people to go into mining and geology and all these other different areas?
Yes, geoscience, AGI has a lot of reporting on this. The geoscience programs across the nation are suffering declining enrollment. There needs to be a realignment in the focus of some of those programs, and also a move to get people trained in geosciences at younger ages so they come into college interested and engaged so that we have the adequate workforce, absolutely.
What can Congress do to help motivate that, both in terms of just excitement and general awareness, and then also, of course, hard resources?
Targeted programs that can support groups like ours, the state surveys, many of which are in universities, university groups, to attract students in on focused programs. There are such efforts being unrolled right now as we speak from various agencies. More support for those programs would be fantastic.
And then this is just a simple question for everybody on the panel. Dr. Hayman, we'll of course start with you. Is Earth MRI a valuable tool in helping to address this workforce challenge and then also be able to identify where these critical natural resources are?
Yes, Earth MRI is fantastic because we can employ students right away, get them right out in the field, get them analyzing rocks right away in the lab for pragmatic, real skill building, absolutely.
Mr. Lovin, Earth MRI good for these things?
Yes, from a business perspective, absolutely. It creates opportunities, allows us to hire folks, create jobs, and deploy new technologies.
Dr. Holley, welcome. Good to see you here. Earth MRI good for this?
Absolutely. The mining schools also need more support.
And then I'm out of time, so same question. Is Earth MRI helpful for all these things that we've been talking about?
Yes, it creates certainty on geology and for funding and workforce.
I'm out of time, Chairman. Thank you for letting me wave on. Yield back.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes Representative Begich for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question for Dr. Lederer. Alaska has more than a century of accumulated geological field notes, maps, and exploration records, much of it still sitting in paper archives. Your testimony highlights how AI and machine learning can transform that kind of legacy data into modern discoveries. How does Earth MRI's data preservation work, combined with AI and machine learning tools, enable us to revisit and unlock value from legacy data sets? And what targeted investments would you recommend Congress make in that area as part of reauthorization?
Thank you for the question. Earth MRI is enabling the capture and preservation of legacy data in two ways. One is through grants to the state surveys. So often the states lack the resources or funds to digitize their collections. In some cases, those collections are lost. Usually they're retained in some sort of archival format, but we're not just talking about paper. We're talking about physical rock collections. We're talking about old field notes, maps, things that may have been published but aren't always. And there's additional value that could be extracted from them, especially when we start talking about both training AI ML systems. You need good ground truth and labeled data to do that, but also in sort of a positive feedback, you can train AI systems that will assist with the digitization and extraction of that information. So there's kind of two applications that are mutually reinforcing there.
When you're looking at these map outputs, do you utilize that data to identify what the likely mineral constituents are within these bodies?
The way I think about it is the best guide for where to direct future exploration efforts is where we have identified resources in the past. So that contributes to knowing what to expect, so you can make better predictions, using AI ML tools or just intuition and sound geological judgment. It also allows us to classify different prospective terrains by what the geology tells us, what deposit types might be there. So for example, highly magnetic terrains may correspond with different mineral associations that you can see in the map, and then you can predict based on new surveys where to go look.
What would you like to see more of from the USGS in terms of resolution as it's gathering this data and building this inventory set? What's missing for you?
The dream would be seamless coverage across the entire United States at a operational resolution. There's always a trade-off between resolution and coverage. I think you can do a lot with what we call rank 1 geophysical surveys. These are high-resolution Earth MRI standard surveys with a line spacing of something like 200 to 400 meters. That's tight enough that you can start to identify individual targets. But to acquire that data at country-wide scale, and even if you exclude it only to magnetics and radiometrics, that's a significant undertaking. When you start adding other data types like airborne electromagnetics, it's certainly a nice to have, but it starts to become more powerful the more data types you have in conjunction.
What additional tools do you think we should be using at USGS to achieve the level of resolution that's useful? And I'm talking not just on the surface, but at depth as well.
Yep. After airborne geophysics, there's ground-based field work that needs to happen. And ultimately, and this is where I think, the private sector comes in, there's subsurface data gathering that needs to happen after that.
Is that where you think the appropriate line of demarcation should be between government and the private sector? Or do you think there are some things that the government should be doing along those lines as well to augment some of the more promising targets that they've identified?
Yeah, there's precedent for that type of exploration activity. The U.S. Bureau of Mines did a lot of that. There was a program the USGS ran called the Defense Minerals Exploration Administration. I'd be happy to provide more details about that.
That would be great. And with that, I see my time's expired, so I yield back.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes Representative Crank for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Hayman and Dr. Lederer, both of your testimonies highlight the many applications Earth MRI has outside of mineral data and the benefit it provides in promoting the geophysical survey industry. How important to each of you is it that the U.S. not only retains this skill set but continues to grow it? Dr. Lederer?
Yeah, I think workforce development is one of the more tangible outcomes of Earth MRI thus far. It's allowed the USGS to hire and attract and retain talented geoscientists. It's also allowed the state surveys to do that. And it's created new opportunities in the private sector that simply didn't exist prior to the program.
Yeah, Dr. Hayman.
Yeah, I think where the federal government in particular is essential here is that the business cycles, as we know, cause fluctuations in the population of geoscientists and engineers in any specialization. Having a resilient, longer-term strategy, employing the university partnerships, employing the state surveys, really can create a stable workforce that's always ready to respond to the next challenge.
Yeah, and a follow-up, I guess, for both of you. Do you think it's important that USGS mapping programs like Earth MRI are used to promote U.S. capabilities in the geophysical survey sector?
It's in the DNA of these programs from the beginning of things like State Map and other programs like this, that they were founded originally to do exactly that, to make sure there was a national security need met by training the next generation of geoscientists. Absolutely.
Yeah, Dr. Lederer, any thoughts on that?
The name Earth MRI would imply there could be a broader goal, but I think we need to invest in our capabilities at home before we can contribute meaningfully internationally.
Yeah. Dr. Lederer, your testimony highlights how Earth MRI data helps universities and private companies make better investment and research decisions. One of the program's greatest strengths is that this information is publicly available, and it can be used by state geological surveys, by academia, and the private sector. As Congress looks to expand Earth MRI and potentially accelerate data collection and processing through third-party contractors, should we be concerned about ensuring sensitive geologic data and underlying data sets remain under U.S. control during that process?
I think there's a risk associated with closing off data, that it's underappreciated, right? So part of the reason we lack the information we need to make sound decisions about our own domestic resources is because we don't have any requirement to make that data publicly available. Earth MRI is changing that, and I think we're seeing this transformation precisely because the data is public. That said, there are risks, of course, with being too open, but those can be mitigated through things like physical access to samples and physical access to prospective areas.
Yeah, are there safeguards that Congress should consider?
I wouldn't be able to comment on that, but I think in other countries, for example, in Australia, when a company does work, there's an embargo period between when they collect data and when that data becomes public. So that's an appropriate safeguard that seems to work well there.
Okay. Dr. Holley, the Breakthrough Institute issued a white paper about the need for the Earth MRI program to include subsurface drilling to verify results. And your testimony mentions the need for an ore sampling campaign. What are the limitations in identifying mineral deposits from the data collected in the Earth MRI program? And how can additionally sampling improve the accuracy of what's beneath our subsurface?
Thank you, Mr. Crank. It's a question of scale. So when you have data over a very broad area, in mineral exploration, we follow a policy around infill. You don't go ahead and grid everything at a very fine resolution. That would be a waste of money. You space out your lines, you space out your sampling before you, for example, go in for more site-specific things like drilling. You don't drill on a grid from the beginning. You drill on wide lines, and then you start filling those in as you find more information. So I think it is possible that we may identify some things within Earth MRI where drilling to help understand the fundamental geologic architecture of the Earth's crust would provide us information not just for that site, but for other sites and create a multiplier effect. I wouldn't immediately go in and start putting pinholes in the map of the United States without more data.
Yeah, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Before I go into closing statements, I'm going to recognize Ranking Member Ansari.
Thank you. I ask unanimous consent to enter 2 letters into the record. The first is from Geothermal Exploration and Development Company Zanskar in support of Earth MRI and GeoDawn to help fill the mapping gaps, and another from the Breakthrough Institute in support of increased annual appropriations for this program to ensure we can continue expanding our federal geoscience database and remain competitive with our peer nations.
Without objection. I want to thank the witnesses for their valuable testimony today and the members for their questions. The members of the subcommittee may have some additional questions for the witnesses, and we will ask you to respond to those in writing. Under Committee Rule 3, members of the subcommittee must submit questions to the subcommittee clerk by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, June 30th. The hearing record will be held open for 10 business days for these responses. If there's no further business, without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.